Open session. And moving on to item 8, administrative personnel. And I would like to introduce everyone to Dr. Del Burns.
Madam Chair, members of the board, conversation has been held with Coach Foy, and he remains an employee of New Hanover County Schools. His current employment status is suspended without pay effective through the end of the 1920 school year. Coach Foy is in agreement with this. Madam Chair, members of the board, I have 3 recommendations for you this evening. The first is a recommendation for Chief Communications Officer Ann Gibson. Currently, Ms. Gibson serves as a freelance writer in Wilmington. Previously, she served as Director of Communication for the town of Harrisburg. Ms. Gibson received a bachelor's degree in individual studies, print media production from the University of Maryland.
All right. So you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is approved. And I believe Ms. Gibson is here. Yes, all right.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the next recommendation is for an interim director of human resources. Anthony Manzo Jr. has served as an employee relations director in Raleigh, North Carolina. He received a bachelor's degree in psychology from Mammoth University, a master's of science in educational counseling from Florida Atlantic University, and a master's of arts degree in educational administration supervision from Florida Atlantic University.
All right, you've heard the motion, or you've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
So moved.
Is there a second? A second? Okay, but there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
The final recommendation this evening, Madam Chair and members of the board, is for an interim human resources investigator. Dr. Brian Martin currently serves as Chief Operating Officer for Paradox Partners. Previously, Dr. Martin served as Senior Director for Employee Relations in Cary, North Carolina. Dr. Martin received a bachelor's degree in music education from Atlantic Christian College, a master's in education administration from Campbell University, and a doctorate in educational administration from North Carolina State University.
All right, thank you. You have heard the recommendation of Dr. Burns. Is there a motion to approve the recommendation?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved. Thank you, Dr. Burns. Item number 9, Head Start report. Mr. Bullier.
Thank you, Madam Chair, fellow board members. I will be exceedingly brief. I just want to give you a few updates on Title IX. Sorry, they all run together. I just wanted to give you a few updates on Head Start. Our numbers are the same as last month, 112 3-year-olds, 148 4-year-olds for a funded enrollment total of 260. I'd like to share with you briefly about some of the things that we have been doing. We had a Cooking with Kids parent event on February 13th with 50 adults and 47 students attending. Those are big numbers for us. UNCW students hosted a puppet show for Johnson students on the importance of exercising on February 18th. Finger exercises are exhausting if you've ever had a puppet show. Pre-K to kindergarten transition event on February 27th, 2020. 4 staff and 1 administrator attended the North Carolina Head Start, or will attend the North Carolina Head Start conference next month. We had field trips this month for students to fire stations and Children's Museum. And home visits by teachers for all of Johnson's families were conducted on the 20th and the 21st of this month. It's been very busy. Ms. Smiles could not be here. She was under the weather, and she sends her regrets. Moving on to our next appendix, our monthly expenditure report. My monthly reminder that Head Start is a month behind, so our numbers look a little funny. We do operate, or we show you what we have in the rears. But we are on track to meet all of our budgetary requirements for the calendar year. And I will take your questions if you have any. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you for that report. Moving on to information items. And let's see, safety initiatives. It has my name after it, but I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Julie Barnum.
Thank you. So do you want me, Ms. Eastep, do you want me to go through the overview, or do you want to do that part on the reason why?
However you
Okay, I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, as you can see on the screen, the document prepared includes a letter that was sent from the New Hanover County Board of Education to members of the State Board of Education regarding student safety initiatives that are in place within the district. And so I'll go right to the list beyond the letter. The list includes current programming and services. That list has multiple years of implementation and less dated. So this is a compiled, comprehensive list of student safety initiatives that involve professional development, that involve student curriculum materials, and that also involve different processes that are in place to address current safety concerns. So through the programming and services, and many of these things the board has heard more about over the last few months, but want to just give you the compiled list. First, ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences Training on Child Abuse and Neglect, and that's been provided for student support staff. Reconnect for Resilience is an additional trauma-informed and resiliency-focused strategies for whole community balance and well-being. The Reconnect for Resilience training has been offered to school sites and offered to principals to identify staff to participate, because it's really more of a self-care type situation or type training option. And then, for example, when New Hanover Regional was talking about the trauma-sensitive schools partnership, we've had multiple schools, 5 schools trained in the first cohort, and now we have 5 more schools in the second cohort. The first was, the training was provided, or the funding was provided through a community partnership, and then now we're using our Safer Schools grant to add the other pieces. One of the trainings that we are continuing, and I have additional dates for many schools, is the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children. That's the education and prevention of child sexual abuse training for staff. It also covers other forms of abuse and mandated reporting. At this point, we have approximately 600 staff trained, but we have new school teams being trained every couple of weeks. So that one is a 2-hour program. We will have every staff member that works directly with children trained by the beginning of the 2021 school year in Darkness to Light. I want to move on to the Youth Mental Health First Aid. That is an 8-hour full-day training that all staff that work with children will be trained on over the next 2 school years, so the remainder of this school year and through 2021. And that is actually, while the training was developed for working with adolescents, that it's actually still very applicable for all staff who work with any children in the school system. So it focuses on identifying signs and symptoms of mental illness and really prevention efforts to really support interventions. It listed and included the Ethics 360 online portal launch and the Say Something Anonymous reporting system, which is the statewide app funded through Sandy Hook Promise. And then the other pieces that don't have dates necessarily are having a district-wide behavior specialist who is working on social-emotional learning within the construct of multi-tiered systems of support. And so that's really building that behavioral foundation from the core, the tier 1, and then adding on the tier 2 and tier 3 supports for schools to adopt. We have a district-wide investigator for bullying and harassment. And then we are also in the second year of a national school climate project, where we have 5 middle school leadership teams that are working on addressing school climate from the systematic approach and the comprehensive approach of staff to students, and really addressing bias, bullying, and hurtful behaviors within the school and community. And that involves surveying students, surveying parents, surveying teachers, but then also analyzing your practices around any of those areas of concern. Back in the fall, we, within the 6th grade population, piloted adding a program called Shifting Boundaries that is an evidence-based team teaching model that we have the support of Coastal Horizons Rape Crisis Center and Domestic Violence on helping our 6th graders understand the difference between hurting and flirting, helping them understand boundaries, and also understand policies such as Title IX policies and reporting policies. We have created this as a part of the 6th grade health and PE curriculum, again team taught, but then we will be, as you can see, future plans a little bit lower, we'll be pushing that to not really a recycled, but a return of that curriculum for 7th and 8th grade, and so adding on some pieces of that. We are already operating with Sanford Harmony, which is social emotional learning for pre-K through 5th grade, that also focuses on embracing diversity and building healthy relationships, not only in the peer group, but within staff as well. Also this school year, the school mental health leadership team has been self-assessing through the SHAPE initiative, and that's really school mental health quality assessment tool. So it's you can go through a baseline, but then also go through quality indicators of being a responsive school system with school-based mental health as a component. And we have, that is an interagency team actually that includes the health department, Coastal Horizons, and then other interagency partners who support us with school-based mental health services. We are using restorative justice, which is a partnership with UNC Wilmington, as an alternative to school discipline, and most of the time that's really bringing folks into a conversation where we're looking at restorative circles or having dialogue about the event that took place and how folks are feeling about it, and then how to move forward with respect for everyone. So I've identified the school social workers that we have in addition to school counselors and school psychologists. We could share those ratios, but they're pretty strong ratios. The agency partnerships we have for school-based mental health prevention and intervention programs, and then also with the Carousel Center, which is our victim advocacy group for this area, along with mobile crisis services. The additional pieces are the February 2020 funding that was provided by our county for the request of additional programming. So what we will be providing in the 2021 school year will be Safer Smarter Kids, which is an abuse prevention education curriculum that is for elementary ages, so K through 5. It'll focus on helping children understand different tools and languages to protect themselves, but also understand boundaries and understand whether relationships are beneficial or harmful. Shifting boundaries, as I described above, we're going to be using that through 7th and 8th grade, and then providing another round of that for 9th grade that will happen in the health and PE curriculum. But at high school, we will add in bringing in the bystander, which will happen at 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. And if you, generally, high schoolers aren't taking health and PE again at that time, so we'll be working on where to put that in. And again, all of these will have contracted, trained teachers or instructors, and so it's additional to maintain the fidelity of the implementation. We'll have trained instructors for those. We provided the school-based leadership team agenda and minutes, which is interagency and intergovernmental, and then also Safer Schools Task Force agendas and minutes. Regarding Title IX, and I would ask that if Mr. Lewis wants to add anything in, then he can certainly do that, but I'll mention these things. March of 2019, worked on an interagency community Title IX Board of Education committee, so a committee of the board, revising policy language and creating the survey that will be developed, or it's been developed and it's in draft, and that'll be launched forward soon. And then in that is where the education and curriculum work happened through the education subcommittee. So we had all of these materials ready, these curriculum materials ready. In June of 2019, the board designated the funds for the Title IX position and the training. In August and September of 2019, created and filled the position with Mr. Lewis. In February of this year, last month, designated additional funding for positions to support investigations. And then moving on to safety measures. Currently, we're utilizing county government forensic social workers for employee investigations, and those staff are provided to us from the Department of Social Services. School resource officers are assigned to every one of our schools. The use of our internet filters for monitoring any inappropriate use on the NHCS website and through any of the connections with our program. The national criminal and sex offender background checks for employees and volunteers upon initial hire, and then weekly for all. School administrator training on mandatory reporting, and then additionally, school counselors and social workers provide the mandatory reporting training for all of the rest of the staff in the school sites. So administrators had their training from general counsel, and then the rest of the staff had their training from the counselors and social workers. As mentioned, the February 2020 government funding, and that's for human resources support. And then as of March 24th of 2020, looking at the board-sponsored one-day webinar through the North Carolina School Board Association on boundary invasions and sexual grooming, and what all staff should know about inappropriate relationships. I just went through the list.
Yeah, you did.
You did.
10 o'clock.
Well, and you made, you said it very well when we were talking the other day about this is road mapping of where we are and what we are doing, and I think that's a very good way of putting it. Understanding all the different initiatives, trainings, and kind of putting it down and figuring out where we are. So I appreciate, you taking the time to do that and detailing it all. And I think it's a really good list, and it's a living list. We're going to keep adding to it. So, does anyone have any questions?
No, I would add my thanks, ma'am. Your professionalism and dedication to this is really, it's impressive and important, and any one of these initiatives could be important to any student at any moment, and we don't know which initiative, and we don't know which student, and we certainly don't know when, so it's all important, and I'm just very grateful, and, I'm grateful to my fellow board members for pushing these things forward, and to the administration for recognizing this importance.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And as Ms. Barna mentioned, we did share this with the state board, along with documentation from our Title IX meetings and information on our trainings. So, anyone have any questions? All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to the aforementioned Mr. Lewis, Title IX update.
Thank you. So, piggybacking off of some of the things Ms. Barnum stated, so we are currently working on the Title IX survey. I went to a training in Orlando, Florida about a month ago, and that training with the Association of Title IX Administrators. I was able to meet some other colleagues in K-12 districts and work with them and share information and resources. So from that training, I was able to work with a Title IX HR director for a school system in New Mexico who has had similar issues that we're currently facing, and has worked with OCR to put forward a Title IX survey, a harassment survey that really captures what the school climate is about. So from there, I took those questions that they worked with OCR to develop, and that's what I brought back to the school system here as more of a guiding post for us to create our own harassment survey, Title IX survey, that works best for what our district needs. So that we're in the process of that. The next step for the survey would be so right now the survey is being reviewed by the committee, Title IX committee members, and then at the next Title IX committee meeting, We will have a discussion on what those comments are, and then from there, it'll be presented to the board for further discussion. So that's the update with the Title IX survey, but it's coming very, very soon. Also in regards to, I know that also besides the survey, that the policy and procedures are definitely something that everyone wants to know about. So at this point, we are still waiting for the federal government to update and drop their Title IX regulations that the whole Title IX world is really waiting for. The last time I looked was, I think March 3rd, 2020 is the last scheduled date for OMB to review and comment on the proposed regulations. What I would expect is after those dates have passed and they can go into the final phases, once the regulations are dropped, there would be an additional 30 to 90-day grace period for school systems to get themselves together to become in compliance. However, New Hanover County Schools is already working on those things through the Title IX committee. As a policy subcommittee, is looking at what we can do to make sure that we're in the best position to make sure that we meet that compliance standard. So those are some updates I really want to provide. In regards to some support services and some trainings that we're continuing to do, I was able to work with the Family Communications Committee to present to them a really informative discussion about what Title IX actually is in our processes and our procedures. So that was on February 27th. And I will quickly go review what some of our processes are that I talked with them about. Most importantly, how we resolve these Title IX complaints. So as everyone knows, we have the Ethics 360, which is our new reporting system. So once a complaint goes through Ethics 360, we need to, what we are trained to do is administrators review the complaint to make sure that it's Title IX related, sex or gender discrimination that falls in that bucket, then they've comply or carry out these steps that we have trained on. So after the incident comes in, we review it to see if it's sexual misconduct or gender discrimination. And the next step would be for administrators to contact parents to let the parents know that the complaint has come in. We would contact the parent of the reporting party as well as the parent of the respondent, the person that's been accused, to let them know. At the same time, if there are criminal elements, we want to make sure that law enforcement has an opportunity to do their process. So we will defer to law enforcement for reasonable requests to delay our Title IX investigation. So that is part of our process. Where we allow law enforcement, we will contact law enforcement when there are criminal elements. And then once they give us the clear, we will then go ahead and pick up on our Title IX investigation from the school system. But parents are being informed through that process. Once we make the full determination, once we do the full investigation, we make determinations on what the investigation found based on the evidence. Once that determination has been made, we compile all of the evidence, all the documents that were collected, and we upload that to Ethics 360, where we're able to keep a record of that, to track patterns and individuals that have been accused twice, individuals that have been made more than one report, so we can keep that data for later use. After that, we draft outcome letters. Outcome letters are what the accused student and what the complainant student would receive, letting them know what the outcome of the Title IX investigation is. And then from there, we follow up 2 weeks to a month later, school social worker, school counselor. So that's what our Title IX process looks like for the formal process, essentially. Going back to some other training opportunities that we're having on March 6th, and so March 6th, we're having an assembly at Rolling Rice Middle School with the students to remind them what their obligations are as students under the Student Code of Conduct, as well as make sure that they know how to report these type of behaviors that are sexual misconduct or gender discrimination. On March 11th, I'll be having a training with the employees at Rolling Rice Middle School as well, reminding them of their mandatory reporting duties as a Title IX director. As we all know, there is a search for 2 investigators. Once those investigators have been hired, I will be conducting an in-house training for them, which will be 8 hours at this point. It looks like it will be 4 days, or 2 days, 4 hours each day to get them up to speed with what the OCR would expect. And then from there, they will do some shadowing, and then they will be supervised by me as they're going out to actually conduct these investigations. And as Ms. Varnum said, Darkness to Light is a student support service that we have been doing that really talks about sexual harassment, gender discrimination. So at this point, those are the major discussion points that the Title IX committee has been looking at, and I myself, as the Title IX director, have been working on outside of actually conducting some investigations at the same time. Are there any questions?
Mr. Lewis, thank you very much for, I know we've been talking about surveys since we formed the committee, so I just want to thank you for bringing that OCR. We've always struggled on, what type of questions, how to protect confidentiality. It's nice that OCR had something, and I appreciate you bringing that before the committee.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, do you know how soon the survey will be put together? And I know you sound like you got to go through some other steps yet, but what's the timeline on this?
I would say after the next Title IX committee meeting. I don't have that date off the top of my head. I think it is the third Monday in March. Once that is discussed, and then from there we will submit that to the full board. You will be able to have eyes on that and do whatever processes the board needs to have completed so that can be made available to the students in middle school and high school. And that's just a matter of those processes. But at this point, we do have the full draft. I'm collecting comments from the Title IX committee members. And then from there, we'll talk about those comments at the next Title IX committee meeting, which will be the one time that we discuss those. And then it will be provided to the full board for review. So I'm not sure what the calendar looks like, but whatever those dates are for this month,
March
next time.
16th.
March 16th, okay. Well, March 16th is the day that Title IX committee will review as a whole. Right now, it has been the subcommittee, the resources subcommittee that has been reviewing the survey work.
So you're saying that our next school board meeting most likely will have something to look at and approve hopefully.
April, yes, your April
right.
meeting would be hopefully the final check to where that would be
Well,
released. And
I do think we need to find a way to put that out before the public, though. I think the public needs to see those questions and have an opportunity to comment.
We need to be doing something. It's been a long time since we
I
started talking
understand, but
about
I
it. It's
don't-
been since last spring.
But I think the public needs to be able to comment on the questions.
Well,
So I think we could do like a first approval for the board, like, new business and then old business. So I do think parents need a chance to see the questions. So I would like to make sure that we have it available for parents.
And that's a process, we can discuss. Do we want parents to be able to have eyes on that before the next board meeting so we can get that timeline shortened? Or do we want to have that process after the board has had final eyes on it and had any type of procedural discussion that need to be had? I'm open to either way, but at this point, the questions are 90% done substantively. It's just a matter of wording to make sure that they are appropriate and don't re-traumatize anyone, essentially.
so that's 2 weeks there from the time you meet, almost 2 weeks then from the time you meet until we meet. So you could get parent feedback in that time. Once you, as the Title IX committee, decide that it's appropriate, then you could go ahead and put it out to the public. You didn't have to wait to go through us first.
We can, yes, we can.
Yeah.
So if everyone's in agreement that that's the best process,
mean, that would
I
speed
definitely
it
am
up.
not against that. That we do have that little bit of grace period before the next board meeting, yes.
That would, the sooner we start getting the feedback, the more we can be responsive to the situation.
And I will go ahead and say that the survey looks like it's about 11 or 12 questions with a couple of subparts.
Thank you, by the way.
Is there a way that we can collect and Anita, is there a way, or you can talk to technology, if there's a way to collect the information from parents or any feedback from parents if we put the survey questions out? So, kind of like we did with the redistricting? Okay. All right. Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, I can follow up with that tomorrow, and we can figure out those processes.
All right,
All right,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number D, quarterly budget summary ending 12/31/2019, Appendix G. Mary Hazel Small.
Thank you. This quarterly budget summary is presented for your information. And as of the end of the second quarter, we had spent or encumbered 54% of our budget.
All right, are there any questions? And this item is for information only, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
No questions from the board? Okay, all right. Item number E, policy 5400, discussion, naming school facilities. All right, who wants to get started on this one?
Well, we could start off with the reason that we're having this discussion is because there was a petition out about the stadium name at Laney, and I think it's got close to 3,000 signatures, somewhere around that, and obviously the public is interested in looking at this question. So Wayne had brought, you'd ask about this to Wayne about the policy 5400, and he had some information that he felt was necessary for us to know as far as whether we could do this according to policy. I myself am very confused about how it got named in the first place. I know that Jeanette had mentioned she does not remember that the board had really had a lot to say about it. I think that's what you were saying in an email. So I just want to know what's going on with the stadium, because the community obviously has a lot of interest, or they would not have been so enthusiastic about signing this petition. So I guess the question is, Wayne, what was the hang-up? I mean, what was your take on what was going on as far as renaming the stadium? Or even just taking the name off?
Well, you have a policy. It's before you. It's up to the board to interpret its own policy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think our policy that stands now for what happens forward is good. This was done 2005, the stadium was named. Jeanette, do you remember that the board had any input in the naming of the stadium? You were here during that time.
No, we did not.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you, I live in that part of town. I taught in Laney, at Laney. I have many friends that still teach there, a lot of students I know that go there. And so I just asked, how did it happen, since I couldn't find any information? And from what I hear, it was done by the athletic booster club, with the information from Coach Lynch to do this, because that was right at the same time that Dr. Holliday came down to central office as
I hate to interrupt, but
okay.
what are we talking about? I thought we were
I'm
talking
trying to
about
understand,
policy
I'm trying to
5400.
understand if there was any policy then, so shouldn't we maybe apply it now and start?
Well, I'm just wondering, I'm just reading, it says
Okay.
policy 5400 discussion. Is there,
Right, and the discussion, Wayne just said it's up to us to decide.
No, it's up to us to decide what the policy
Policy.
says. And so the
Mhm.
discussion has to be about how,
Policy.
the policy.
Mhm.
So we have to go back to deciding,
Mhm.
okay, where are we going with this?
Very good, that's what this.
And I think the sentence in question is, the board reserves the right to change facility names at any time
Correct.
by following the process set forth in this policy. And then, however, the board will honor any contractual obligations regarding the naming of facilities. So we obviously have no contractual obligations. So I think it's deciding, what does that mean? I don't know that you can go back in time and say, well, it wasn't handled correctly, or principals in the past had more authority than they do now, or than we're trying to give them now, because Braswell Stadium was named the same way. So it's deciding, okay, what are we doing now with the facility? And how are we going to carry forward? And that's what's before the board. We have a request to rename the stadium. How does the board want to proceed?
Well, there is, I believe that Mr. Sutton had contacted the North Carolina government, School of Government, and had asked about our particular policy, and if we could literally change the name of whatever the facility is without necessarily following this procedure, because we have that right as a school board. And so, Wayne, did you contact them and find out if that was true?
No, ma'am.
Okay, well, he informed you, how long, I think it
Ms.
was last.
Justice, I don't work for that individual. I work for the board. The board did not ask me to
Okay,
do that.
well, maybe we should do that then.
If the board directs me to do that, I'll be glad to do it.
Okay, so we can find out what we need to do from here. If we have the ability to do that without following this procedure, then maybe we could have that conversation during the next board meeting.
This shouldn't be delayed. I'm sorry
Sir, 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 we're
I'm
having.
sorry, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
What sounds strange to me is that we would be, that any school of government would say that you can disregard your own policy. That does not sound correct to me.
Well, we're not lawyers, and we're not,
No,
you
I'm
know,
not,
these
but
experts.
we've got two right here.
But why don't we have Wayne go ahead and contact them so we can get their input, because they're a whole building full of lawyers,
Judy,
literally.
you know, there's another way to go about it.
Okay.
Is present a policy to the policy committee as to change this policy. If you think that we need to revamp it or tighten it up, present it to the policy committee, and then we can change the whole policy going forward, so there's less ambiguity, which is it's just a suggestion.
Well, that is a suggestion, but if it's within the body for us to literally handle this one particular situation, because this is very unusual, and if it wasn't for the community's interest, and that's where I'm coming from being part of that community, apparently, you know, this has been going on for a very long time, and it doesn't even have anything to do with what's going on the last year or two.
What's been going on for a long time?
Discomfort with having the name applied to the stadium without having any public input.
So that's what I'm saying. It seems like you're insinuating that because you're a part of this community, we are too.
Well, you are too, absolutely.
Yes, we are too.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're insinuating that there's been a bunch of names that may not have been named, that may not have followed a particular policy. Is that, I'm just asking.
No,
And
this
if
is the
that's
only-
the situation, because I think she mentioned Braswell too. So what I'm trying to say is if that is the situation, we need to tighten up the policy to know, you know, so there is no ambiguity. So this isn't, you know, this stadium and stadium at Laney, the stadium at Hoggard, because
Well,
if
can I
there are
just-
other ones that are going on, I think.
Can I just mention this? Braswell was not an administrator in central office that was supervising the people that made the decision to put the name on the stadium. This is a well-known fact that it was done by, it wasn't, Braswell was a different situation. He wasn't working at central office and supervising people that made decisions.
He was the football coach of the football
Right,
squad.
right, whereas
It's
Dr.
not-
Holliday was a supervisor of the people that made these
What I'm
decisions, so
trying to
that's a
say
bit odd.
is regardless of who they are, we need to, if you want to come up with a policy to name or to remove names, I think that whereas this may be the situation you're talking about now, obviously Braswell, there may be a situation in the future. I don't know when it's gonna be. If there's other places that have been named, I think it's important to come up with a policy that specifically addresses that. So what I'm trying to do is, that's a good idea. If you think that you want to come up with a policy that addresses the kind of that tightens it up, so we know what we're talking about, I think that's a good idea. So I would just ask that, present it to the next policy committee, and we can certainly move forward, because this way we won't have this problem.
Well,
There are 3 facilities at Laney that were named that the board has no knowledge of.
right, I appreciate that, and the thing is, but none of them were named after somebody supervising the people that suggested the name at the time.
Well, I'm not sure when the Marianne Nunnally,
I'm not
Fine
either.
Arts was, but she was the principal there, and then she went to J.C. Rowe, so I don't know if she was still an employee at the time.
Oh, I believe she actually,
And I think I think it's more important, the fact that we're naming that before, obviously it's not now, but before, we were naming buildings without any input. So I think ultimately,
Correct.
that's the biggest problem we're trying to
Absolutely.
have here.
I agree
So
with
what we're
you.
trying to do is, again, come up with a policy. I don't care if they worked in Carolina Beach, if they worked in Laney,
Hmm.
Hanover, Hoggard, anywhere, we need to come up with a policy that addresses it. So when we move forward, we have a specific roadmap of how we remove names,
Okay.
how we name things, so we don't come into this issue again. That's all I'm saying. So
well,
that's why I'm asking you for.
I actually agree about the part about removing things, because right now, I think what we have finally come up with, especially last spring, or I think when we had changed it because of the situation with another employee, that was a good idea. And I also, the public input, I don't know when that was placed on this particular policy, because it's got quite a few revisions, like 5. So I don't know when that was put on, but that should have been, honestly, should have been on from the beginning, but that's the way things happen. That's the way life is. But what I was saying about, it literally says, according to the interpretation from the legal group that you spoke to, and I guess other legal groups too, that we do have the power now for this particular instance to change it. And there seems to be quite a bit of public interest, not just interest, desire to do this. So, I mean, we could go ahead and have Wayne check on that. I could go ahead and try to, working with Jeanette, write a part of policy that says you can go back. Whoop. Oh, camera. That wasn't a person. I just saw the- I'm glad it's not a person. That was as big as a person. Or I could work with, and we could do both. He could check with this
No,
group.
absolutely, because
Why
I
don't we
think it's
do both?
important to check with
Yeah.
Wayne to get a specific policy. The good news is I don't know if this is going to be part of our policy manual that we purchased last.
And
but
I did
bet-
check with the NC.
I bet the NCB,
Oh, good.
School Board Association may have a policy that we can look at too.
Yeah,
I've already
absolutely. That's a good
I've already
idea.
gotten that.
So I think it's a good discussion on
Okay.
policy 5400. I'm glad you brought it up. My recommendation is
All three of those things.
let's get
Yeah.
a policy together so we know moving forward. And,
So we can't, if we
so if you
decide
can
to.
get that to
then
the
do that.
policy committee, when's the next meeting for the policy committee?
We haven't established a date
Okay.
yet. We've got so many
All right,
loose
so
ends with.
am I hearing correctly that that everyone is feeling that we do not have a mechanism as of right now to remove the name?
Well, we possibly do. Wayne's gonna check on that.
Okay.
So he can do that. And I have no problem, I'll check with the
Board
School Boards Association and see what policy they have that they were gonna send
They've
us.
already sent it to me. She
Oh,
sent
I-
it to me today.
Okay, so I
She has
could,
some sample policies, but we do not, so
Okay.
I can send those to, I can
Thank
send
you.
those
Okay.
to the two people on the policy committee.
And then we can start that process
So
to
we
get a
can start
policy
the
together.
process.
yeah, find out the date and just send that to me and we'll look at it together and Wayne can find, out what he can find out. And next meeting, we can have a good discussion about it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
I hate that my petition just got hijacked and turned into 5400. I truly do. And I appreciate y'all's time, but honestly, like, I'm trying to work with y'all, but seriously, like, I had decided word for word, policy 1520.
What's the next thing?
Pardon?
Policy
What's the next thing we have?
What is next thing?
specifically states,
Superintendent's report.
you have the
Okay.
power right now to vote on this.
Pardon?
Please, someone at least call for a vote. Take it. It's right there in writing, 1520. Now, we can discuss. I want my petition discussed. It's turned into 5400. Like, I
Mr.
get
Sutton,
5400.
thank
That's
you.
the excuse y'all gave me in the first place to sidestep, but like, there's other policies.
Excuse me, sir, you are out of order. Thank you.
You're right.
Item number 11, Superintendent's Report.
Chair Estep, members of the board, the hour is late. Today is my second day as interim superintendent. Yesterday, I'd like to share that we had some very good meetings with probably 90 to 95% of all of the central office staff. Your chair and I met in 5 groups, had great conversation. It was very great. It was good to have the questions that we had. In terms of getting to know the district, that was very helpful. I'll be meeting with lots of individuals through the rest of this week. Starting next week, I will visit every one of our 44 schools over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. And initially, my focus as interim superintendent is on internal relationships, and then I'll shift to external relationships. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know even more folks and sharing more with you at future board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 12, Board Chairperson's Report. The only thing I wanted to really talk about was, not that I want you to move on, but talking about the permanent superintendent search. We did talk a little bit about how we want to conduct that search and whether we want to reach out to more than one organization to conduct that search. So we need some, I need some guidance, or we need some guidance. Mr. Bullard had looked into some organizations. So what is the board's thought on moving forward?
I've looked at those. I'm personally comfortable with the NCSBA. I think that they offer a superior product based on what I've seen at a lower price.
I believe it was today that we received this information. I would like some time before I say that one particular group One of the things that we have a tendency to do, I've noticed in the past, is sometimes move too fast about some things that are gonna be very important, so I would like some more time to research these groups. And other groups out, I mean, I know Wayne sent us some good information, but this is really important that we do this right.
It is important. What I would not want to do is wait till our next board meeting, which is not scheduled until the 14th of April. So I think, in my mind, that's too long to wait. What I'm hoping is if we would like another chance to discuss this, can we set an interim meeting?
Sure.
So
Good idea.
I don't know if everyone would like to look to, we have a budget meeting already scheduled for March 17th at 4 o'clock. Could we also schedule some time for that date to talk about this item?
Sure.
Would that be okay
Yeah,
with
I'm
everyone?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
given the circumstances of late, your finance officer and I had conversation today, and we will not be prepared to present information to you at that March 10th meeting regarding the budget.
Okay. So can
So
we turn that into an interim
That
meeting
would
for
be
that?
my thought,
Okay.
if that's what you choose.
Okay, then if that is acceptable to the board, we will turn that into an interim
March
meeting.
10th or March
March
17th?
17th.
No, March 10th was the,
We
have two budget meetings.
yeah, which one?
We're not doing
One
the
was the 10th,
10th.
one was the 17th.
That was.
I don't have anything on my calendar for the
The
10th.
10th got deleted, it got
Got
canceled. Yeah.
Okay, is everyone good for the 10th?
oh, absolutely.
Why can't we stay with the 17th so we don't have to give up a day for a short meeting?
Okay, is everyone good for the 17th?
I'll take it.
I'm fine either way.
Okay, let's, 17th, going once, going twice? 17th it is.
Great.
Okay. All right. That is all I've got. Does anyone have any committee reports? No? Consensus items, item 14. We already did we have? Yes. So personnel. Dr. Burns?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I present the personnel list found in Appendix H for your approval.
All right. Is there a motion to approve the list as presented?
Move for approval?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It is approved. Item B, budget amendments, Appendix I. Ms. Small?
Thank you. I present the budget amendments for general capital outlay and enterprise fund, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
All right. Are there any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the budget amendments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? They are approved. We have no items of old business. New business. Item A, June summer school proposal for math and science, Appendix K. Dr. Smith?
Yes, would ask the board's approval for the New Hanover County Schools 2019-2020 summer school testing plan.
Is there a motion to approve the Appendix K, the summer school proposal?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is approved.
Thank you.
Item B, school technology resolution, Appendix L. Mr. Bullard?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is a resolution that was requested by the School Boards Association. It has to do with a lawsuit that was filed about a decade ago against the state of North Carolina on behalf of most of the school systems in the state. It had to do with fines and forfeitures that had been collected from collected by various departments of the state, including the Department of Revenue, Department of Transportation, parking tickets from universities, Employment Security Commission, et cetera. Under the Constitution, fines, forfeitures, and penalties collected are supposed to go to the benefit of the public schools. If they're collected in the county, they go directly to the county that they're collected in, the school system in that county. If they're collected by a state agency, then by law, the funds go into a fund that is set up by the state to go to pay for technology needs of local school systems, and the funds are divided up based on the student population in each school system. So a lawsuit was, some of those fines and forfeitures were not being paid and collected, so the lawsuit was to force that money to be paid, and the local school systems won the lawsuit and got a judgment against the state. The state refused to pay it. It's about $700 million, I believe, $747 million, and the state has refused to pay it. There's really no mechanism under the law to make the state pay a court judgment. So therefore, it has to be appropriated by the General Assembly through political means. So the purpose of this resolution is for local school boards to just once again request the state to actually honor the court judgment that was entered against them and pay the judgment so that the funds can come to the local school boards.
All right. Are there any questions on this item?
Just a quick point of clarification. Are you saying that the state of North Carolina can ignore its own Supreme Court ruling?
Sounds like it.
Essentially, yes, in this case.
Okay.
Because there's no mechanism to
Must be nice to be the
enforce the
king.
order. If you had a judgment against a private individual or private company, you could do what's called execute on the judgment by having that corporation or person's assets seized and sold at auction to pay your judgment. There's no provision in the law for that process to take place against the state of North Carolina.
I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you.
And what is the NCSBA going to do with this resolution? Present them all to the General Assembly?
I think they're going to present it to the General Assembly, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I mean, General Assembly is the one that pays for teachers, so you don't want to push too hard, right?
I guess that's a political question.
Okay.
Move to adopt the resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
They got a big chunk of money in their treasury.
All right, passes 6-1. Is there any correspondence that any board member would like to share? No? Announcements, the next regular meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education will be held on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. in the Board of Ed Center. We are also obviously going to be having an interim meeting now on March 17th with the time to be announced. I'm assuming 4 o'clock probably be the time. Once again, I would like to welcome Dr. Burns.
Thank you.
To our district, and we do not need a closed session, correct? So that is done. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.